They say when the blood moon rises, the Lycan King must claim a mate, or lose his soul forever. But legends rarely tell the truth. They whisper fragments, pieces of what remains after centuries of pain. This is the full story, the truth of the curse that began with love and ended with blood. Long before men built kingdoms and named them their own, before silver turned from moonlight into a weapon, there lived a race born of divine breath, the Lycans, guardians of the forest, protectors of the balance between light and shadow. They walked as men under the sun, and as wolves under the stars. The moon goddess, Selene, created them from the first tears she wept upon the earth, and she loved them as her children. Among them rose one above all, a warrior, a king, and her most beloved creation, Theron Bloodfang. He was born on a night when the moon bled red for the first time, and prophecy whispered that his destiny would shape the fate of both gods and men. He was strong, noble, fearless. But even gods make mistakes when they give too much power to a heart that feels too deeply. For Theron was not only a king, he was a man who could love beyond reason. And it was that love that became his ruin. Once long ago, Theron loved a mortal woman. Her name is lost to time, erased by the centuries and by the curse itself. But in the days of her life, she was his world. Her laughter could still storms. Her touch could calm the beast that lurked within him. He trusted her with everything, his heart, his throne, his pack, and his soul. But humans, fragile as they are, often fear what they cannot understand. And when whispers reached her ear that her lover was no man but a monster, fear twisted into betrayal. One night, while Theron slept beside her, she led hunters through the forest with a silver dagger hidden in her trembling hand. She kissed him one last time, then turned away as they struck. The forest burned, the Lycans fell one by one, and when Theron awoke, it was to the scent of his people's blood and her perfume fading into the night. He found her, kneeling at the altar of Selene, begging for forgiveness. And that was when the beast in him broke free. Theron's roar split the heavens. The ground trembled beneath his fury. He cursed the woman's name, cursed her bloodline, cursed himself. And when the rage was done, the woman he had loved lay lifeless in his arms. Her heart and his stopped together. The moon goddess appeared, her light filling the dark forest. She looked upon her once perfect creation, now drenched in blood and grief, and her voice shook with sorrow. "You have slain love itself, my child. From this moment, you will walk in darkness until love restores what hatred destroyed." Theron fell to his knees, his claws scraping the earth. "Then I will never love again," he spat. "If love can betray, let me be rid of it forever." Selene's gaze hardened. "So be it. When the blood moon rises each century, your beast shall awaken. If you do not claim a mate, one of pure innocent heart, your soul will burn from within, and your kingdom will crumble to ash." She raised her hand, and chains of moonlight coiled around his wrists, searing his flesh, binding his fate. "Your salvation will come," she whispered, "in a form you despise, the innocence of a helpless heart." Then she vanished, and the night swallowed him whole. Centuries passed, kingdoms rose and fell. And in the mountains of Ardenthal, a dark fortress remained untouched by time. Inside, the Lycan King endured his endless punishment. Every century the red moon would rise, and with it, his agony. Each transformation tore through him like fire through bone. His veins glowed with molten silver. His claws dug into the stone as he fought the madness. Chains forged from divine power bound him to his throne room, and his cries echoed through the halls like the wails of a dying god. Outside, the world called him a monster, a legend. A warning told to children to keep them from the woods. But within those walls he was simply a man drowning in centuries of loneliness. He had forgotten the warmth of another's touch, the sound of laughter that wasn't haunted by regret. And though he would never admit it, deep within his cursed heart, Theron still longed for the very thing he had sworn to despise. Love. Now, as the blood moon rose once more, its crimson light spilling across his empty kingdom, Theron felt the curse awakening again. His chains tightened, his body trembled, his heart pounded with the ache of 1,000 years, and somewhere far below, in the valley where hunger ruled and hope had long died, a young woman named Isabella whispered a desperate prayer to the same goddess who had cursed him. Neither knew that their destinies had already begun to intertwine, that the goddess's final prophecy was stirring, that this blood moon would not end in blood, but in redemption. Because sometimes even monsters are capable of love. And sometimes, innocence isn't weakness. It's the one thing strong enough to tame a king. The sun had not touched the valley in weeks. Thick clouds hung over the land like a shroud, and the wind that swept through the forest carried the stench of rot and despair. In the village of Eldenhollow, hunger was a living thing. Children cried through the night, their ribs pressing against their fragile skin. The fields had long turned to dust, and even the rivers whispered of death. In a small, crumbling cottage on the edge of the woods lived a young woman, Isabella Ward. Her hands were calloused from labor, her cheeks hollow from hunger, but her spirit, it still burned bright. Every morning, she would wake before dawn to search for herbs and roots, and every evening, she would kneel beside her dying father's bed, whispering, "Just one more day, Papa. I'll find something tomorrow, I promise." But promises could not feed a starving family, and tomorrow never seemed to come. That night, the moon rose red. The villagers bolted their doors, whispering prayers to a goddess they no longer believed in, because when the blood moon rose, the Lycan King's curse awoke. They said no one who entered the forest on that night ever returned, but desperate hearts do not fear legends, and Isabella's heart, though fragile, was desperate enough to walk where angels feared to tread. She wrapped her cloak tight, kissed her brother's forehead, and stepped into the darkness. The forest was alive, not with birds or wind, but with whispers, voices carried by the mist. Faces seemed to shift between the trees, eyes glimmered in the shadows. The deeper she went, the colder it became. Each breath left frost in the air. Her hands shook as she held up her lantern, and then she saw it. A castle of black stone, rising like a wound in the heart of the forest. Twisted spires clawed at the sky, and the iron gates stood half open, as if the darkness itself was waiting for her. Isabella hesitated. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind. Never speak the Lycan King's name. Never seek his mercy. He offers none. But she took another step, then another, until the gates groaned open and swallowed her whole. Inside, the silence was deafening. Torches burned with blue flame. Statues of wolves stood guard along the hall, their stone eyes gleaming as if alive. At the end of the corridor, a great throne stood beneath a broken skylight, and on it, slumped but still regal, sat the creature of legend, the Lycan King. His broad shoulders were wrapped in a cloak of dark fur, and scars mapped the skin beneath his torn armor. One of his golden eyes burned bright. The other was clouded by an old wound. Chains of silver still hung from his wrists, relics of the goddess's curse. For a long moment, he said nothing, only watched her, this trembling human girl who dared enter his den of monsters. "Do you know where you stand, mortal?" he said at last, his voice low, almost a growl. Isabella bowed her head. "Before the Lycan King, my lord. And yet you live." She swallowed. "My family. They are dying. I've come to beg your mercy." At that, something dark flickered across his face, a shadow of amusement, maybe pity. "Mercy!" He stood, and the ground seemed to quake beneath him. "Do I look like a creature that knows mercy?" Her voice trembled, but she did not run. "No, my lord, but you are said to be powerful, and once long ago, kind." That stopped him. For a moment the chains at his wrists rattled softly, as if even they remembered the man he used to be. Kindness, he muttered, almost to himself. That word died centuries ago. Then he descended the steps, his golden eyes never leaving her face. Each step brought with it the scent of pine, smoke, and danger. You seek my help, he said. What will you offer in return? She lifted her chin, forcing courage into her voice. Whatever you ask. Careful, he warned, his tone like thunder rolling in the distance. I could ask for your life. Then take it, she whispered, if it means my family will live. A silence fell, heavy and alive. Then slowly he circled her like a predator testing prey that didn't flee. You have no gold, no land, no power, nothing but your trembling body and your foolish heart. He stopped behind her, his voice a whisper of danger. You want to save them? Then give me yourself. Isabella froze. Myself? Every part of you, he said, his tone colder now. Your days, your nights, your breath, your body, everything that makes you you, will belong to me. Her throat tightened. Tears burned in her eyes, but she nodded. Then I agree. He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath on her neck. You do not understand what you've done. I understand enough, she whispered. You'll help my family. That's all that matters. He studied her, really looked at her, and for the first time in centuries, the beast saw something he couldn't destroy, something pure. Very well, he said finally, voice rough. The bargain is sealed. He raised a clawed hand, and his palm glowed faintly with red light. When he touched her wrist, a symbol burned into her skin, a mark of the blood moon. From this night on you are bound to me, Isabella Ward of Eldon Hollow. You will live in my castle, breathe my air, walk my halls, until the moon tires of you, or until I do. He turned away before she could speak. Your family's hunger will end by dawn, but so will your freedom. And with that, the great doors slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside the kingdom of shadows, and inside the curse of a king who had forgotten how to love. The doors of the great hall slammed behind her, and Isabella flinched at the echo. It rolled through the corridors like thunder, fading into a silence so deep it pressed against her ears. The Lycan King had vanished into the shadows above the stairs, leaving her alone with her heartbeat. Only the flicker of blue torches kept the darkness at bay. For a long moment, she could not move. The weight of what she had done crushed her chest, the bargain, the mark still glowing faintly on her wrist, the realization that there would be no turning back. Finally, she gathered her breath and whispered, It's just a castle, just walls and stone. But even stone can breathe when cursed by a god. She began to walk, her footsteps soft against the marble floor. The air smelled of cold iron, damp earth, and something wild, the lingering scent of the Lycan King himself. It made her heart race, though she didn't know if it was from fear or something she dared not name. The corridors twisted endlessly, lined with portraits that seemed to watch her. Eyes of painted wolves followed her as she passed. Once, she thought she heard a low growl echo from behind a door, but when she turned, there was only silence. Then, from the shadows, a soft voice. You shouldn't wander alone, my lady. Isabella gasped. A woman stood before her, tall, with silver hair braided down her back, wearing a faded servant's gown. Her eyes, sharp and kind all at once, held the weary wisdom of someone who had lived many lives. Who are you? Isabella asked, clutching her cloak. A servant, the woman replied. You may call me Mira. I serve the king, and now it seems I serve you. Isabella blinked. Serve me? By order of His Majesty, Mira said softly. He has asked that your needs be tended to. Come, you must rest. Mira led her through the castle's heart. They passed empty banquet halls draped in cobwebs, long staircases lit by moonlight, and rooms filled with relics of forgotten centuries. Armor, books, portraits of men who all bore the same golden eyes. "It's so quiet," Isabella whispered. "Quiet?" Mira smiled faintly. "No, my lady. The castle never sleeps. It listens." The words sent a chill down Isabella's spine. When they reached her chamber, Isabella hesitated. The room was vast, far grander than anything she'd ever known. A canopy bed of black velvet, a fireplace carved with wolf sigils, and a balcony overlooking the endless forest. The air shimmered faintly with enchantment. "Many women have stayed here," Mira said as she lit the fire. "None for long." Isabella turned sharply. "What do you mean?" The older woman sighed. "The curse, my lady. No woman who enters this castle ever leaves." "You mean they were killed?" "No," Mira whispered, her eyes darting to the door. "Worse, they fell in love." Isabella couldn't sleep that night. The fire crackled softly, throwing shadows across the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the king's golden eyes, the scars, the way his voice had sounded when he said, "You belong to me." Somewhere deep in the castle a howl rose, long, broken, filled with torment. It wasn't a cry of rage. It was the cry of a soul begging for something it could never have. Isabella rose, pulled her cloak around her shoulders, and stepped onto the balcony. The blood moon hung over the mountains, staining the world crimson. In the courtyard below, she saw him, the Lycan King, bare-chested, kneeling among the ruins, the moonlight catching the chains that bound his wrists. His head was bowed, his breath ragged. He looked less like a monster now, and more like a man carrying a weight too heavy to bear. She didn't know what possessed her, but she whispered softly into the wind, "Why do you suffer so?" As if he heard her, his head lifted, golden eyes flashing up at her balcony. For one impossible moment, they locked gazes across the night. Her heart skipped. He stood, every movement a mixture of strength and pain, and then disappeared into the shadows. The next morning, Isabella awoke to the smell of fresh bread. Mira entered with a tray. "You must eat," the servant urged. His Majesty commanded it. "Commanded?" Isabella frowned. "Does he command even my hunger?" Mira smiled sadly. "He commands everything within these walls. But you have unsettled him." "Unsettled?" "He watches you, my lady, every move, every breath." Isabella's pulse quickened. "Why?" "Perhaps because you do not fear him." Later that day, she wandered into the castle gardens. They were wild and overgrown, but strangely beautiful. Roses with thorns of silver, vines that glowed faintly under the light. She knelt to touch one of the blooms, and a voice rumbled behind her. "Careful, those thorns draw blood that never heals." She turned. He stood there, half in shadow, half in light, the king himself. His cloak flowed in the breeze, his eyes fierce and unreadable. "I didn't hear you approach," she said. "Few do." He stepped closer, his gaze flicking to the mark on her wrist. "Does it hurt?" "Only when I remember what it means," she answered softly. For the first time he almost smiled, a ghost of something long forgotten. "You're brave," he said quietly, "or foolish." "Maybe both." They stood in silence for a moment. The tension between them was almost tangible, not the tension of predator and prey, but something more dangerous. Finally he turned away. "Stay within the inner halls after dark," he warned. "There are things in this castle even I cannot control." "Like what?" "The ghosts of my past." That night, as Isabella lay awake, the castle whispered again. She could hear footsteps in the corridors, soft voices speaking her name, and sometimes the faint sound of a heartbeat that was not her own. In his chambers high above, Theron stood before a shattered mirror, watching the reflection of the woman who had entered his curse and dared to look him in the eye. His hand trembled as he traced the scars across his chest, the marks left by the goddess's chains. He had not felt anything in centuries, not anger, not hope. But now, her voice echoed in his mind, soft as moonlight. If it means my family will live? Theron closed his eyes, and for the first time, the beast inside him stirred, not with hunger, but with something he feared even more: desire, and the fragile, dangerous beginnings of redemption. The days in the castle bled together like melting candle wax, silent, heavy, and uncertain. Each dawn brought the echo of chains from deep within the Lycan King's keep, and each night brought whispers of things that stirred when the moon rose. Isabella had grown accustomed to the quiet, but not to the way the air watched her. Every hallway seemed alive. The tapestries shifted with unseen wind, shadows curled like living smoke, and above it all, his presence loomed. King Theron. He rarely spoke to her now, but she could feel him. A heat in the air, a pulse behind the walls, a pair of golden eyes following her every step. He'd claimed her, yes, but never touched her again. His words from that first night still haunted her. Every part of you belongs to me now. But what did belonging truly mean in a castle filled with ghosts? One night, as storm clouds bruised the sky, Isabella wandered the west corridor. The walls here were colder, the torches dimmer, and the servants refused to walk these halls after dark. Yet something called to her. A faint sound, like a heartbeat, or a cry. Pushing open a massive iron door, she stepped into a chamber she had never seen before, lined with broken mirrors and torn banners. In the center, beneath a shaft of moonlight, stood Theron. His back was to her. His breath came in labored growls. Armor hung heavy across his broad shoulders, but part of it was shattered, and beneath it, she saw it. A scar, glowing faintly with silver fire across his shoulder and chest. It pulsed like a wound that refused to die. She gasped, "You're hurt!" In an instant, he turned, eyes blazing gold. His voice cracked like thunder. "Do not touch me!" She froze, but beneath the fury, she saw it. Pain, not just of the body, but of the soul. A man chained by memory. The air between them quivered. She whispered, "Please, let me help." He stared at her as though she were some foolish angel wandering into hell. And then slowly, as though some invisible force weakened his defiance, he let her approach. When her hand brushed the scar, a shock of light burst between them. Her vision blurred. For a moment, the world around them melted away, and Isabella found herself standing in another time. Before her, Theron stood in human form, younger, smiling, his armor polished, his eyes warm. He knelt before a woman cloaked in white. Her face was beautiful, yet her eyes hid something sharp. The memory unfolded like a nightmare Isabella couldn't escape. "Do you love me?" Theron asked, voice trembling with sincerity. "More than life," the woman replied, but her hands clutched a silver dagger behind her back. The castle's silence had changed. Where once the halls whispered of sorrow and curses, now they murmured something else. Jealousy. Every servant, every guard, every trembling maid who glimpsed the human girl walking beside their king could feel the shift in the air. The beast who had ruled in solitude for centuries now allowed a fragile human near his throne. And for some, that was a sin worth blood. It began with a sound, a whisper behind Isabella as she crossed the moonlit corridor. "You walk too boldly for someone who does not belong here." She turned. Standing in the shadows was Lycan, the king's beta, second in command, and his oldest friend. Tall, lean, with dark auburn hair and eyes that flickered like dying embers. His armor gleamed silver black, the crest of the wolf burned across his chest. There was no kindness in his gaze, only curiosity, and something sharper. "Lycan," Isabella said carefully, lowering her eyes. "You shouldn't frighten me this way." He stepped closer, boots echoing on the marble floor. "I could say the same. You frighten him, though he doesn't see it yet." Her brow furrowed. "The king?" Lycan smirked, circling her slowly like a wolf sizing up prey. You think you're healing him, but you're just a reminder of what destroyed him before. Sooner or later, your innocence will twist the knife deeper. She backed away, heart pounding. You're wrong. He leaned close enough that she could feel his breath. Am I? Tell me, human, do you truly think the Lycan King can love you? Or are you just the latest sacrifice to keep his curse quiet for another moon? From that night, Lucian's words poisoned her thoughts. Every time Theron looked at her, she wondered if it was affection or hunger. Every time his hand brushed hers, warmth turned to doubt. But what she didn't know was that Lucian's jealousy ran deeper than mere rivalry. He had always loved his king, not with devotion, but with ambition. Once, Lucian had believed the throne should have been his. He was born under the Wolf Star, trained to lead the armies, and yet Theron's curse had chained the entire kingdom to silence. For decades, Lucian had waited, serving loyally, watching the king wither under moonlight madness. And now, a fragile mortal woman threatened to undo it all, to awaken the beast's heart, to make the king whole again. That Lucian could not allow. It was the night before the full moon. The castle's great hall was quiet, torches burning low, when Lucien approached the throne. Theron sat there, eyes half-lidded, the scar on his chest faintly glowing beneath his tunic. His voice was low, almost weary. You've been restless, Lucian. Speak. Lucian bowed, but his tone was sharp. I serve to protect you, my king. Yet I see you lowering your guard for a human, a weakness we cannot afford. Theron's eyes snapped open, golden, cold. You forget your place. Lucian's hands clenched at his sides. I forget nothing. She's changed you, softened you. And the pack is beginning to see it. The soldiers whisper. They doubt. You are the blood-fanged king, not some lovesick fool. The growl that tore from Theron's throat silenced the hall. In a flash, he was on his feet, his aura flaring like wildfire. The air trembled with raw power. Choose your next words carefully, Beta. Lucian met his gaze unflinching. Then let me speak the truth. She will be your downfall. For a heartbeat, it seemed Theron might strike him down, claws flexed, eyes burning with fury. But then, something in his expression shifted, a flicker of pain, of restraint. He turned away, his voice barely a whisper. Leave before I forget you were once my brother. Lucian bowed stiffly and retreated into the shadows, but the smirk on his lips returned as soon as he was gone. Mercy, he murmured to himself, will be your ruin, my king. That night Lucien went to the armory, deep beneath the castle. There, in a locked chest, he retrieved something forbidden, a dagger forged of lunar silver, metal that burned lichen flesh. Its blade shimmered faintly, whispering of death. He held it aloft, his reflection cold and wild in the steel. When the blood moon rises, he muttered, the throne will finally be mine. But fate had other plans. Isabella, unable to sleep, wandered the same corridor, drawn by the scent of smoke and the faint hum of power. When she saw Lucien holding the blade, her breath caught. Lucien, what are you doing? His eyes widened, then narrowed. You shouldn't be here. You're plotting against him. He stepped forward, hand reaching for her throat. And you, little human, are the reason he's forgotten what it means to lead. Before he could touch her, a deep rumbling growl filled the air. Lucian froze. Behind him stood Theron, half-shifted, his eyes glowing gold, his fangs bared. The torches flickered under the force of his aura. Put it down, the king said, voice shaking with fury. Lucian dropped the dagger, but not his arrogance. You should have killed me long ago, my king. And you should have remembered loyalty, Theron answered, stepping closer. But for her sake, his eyes flicked to Isabella. I will spare you. Lucian sneered, retreating slowly into the shadows. Then may your mercy be the death of you both." When Lucian was gone, Isabella stood trembling. "Why didn't you kill him? He tried to—" "Because once, he saved my life," Theron said quietly. "And because I will not shed blood before you again." He turned to leave, but she caught his arm. Her voice broke. "Why do you always carry everyone's pain but your own?" He looked down at her, this fragile human who saw him not as a monster, but a man. For the first time, the beast inside him stilled completely. "Because if I don't," he said softly, "the beast wins." She stepped closer, her hand trembling as it brushed his chest, just above the fading scar. The warmth between them flared again, that strange bond of light and breath and blood. "Then let me help you fight it," she whispered. For a long moment he said nothing. Only the sound of his heartbeat, wild, ancient, and human, filled the air. Finally, he turned his hand over and caught hers. "You already are." The blood moon rose again. Its crimson light spilled across the mountains like molten fire, setting the castle's spires aglow. The very air trembled with ancient magic, the kind that woke sleeping beasts and stirred forgotten prophecies. From her window, Isabella watched the world turn red. Down in the courtyard, soldiers chained themselves inside the barracks. Servants sealed their doors and whispered prayers to the moon goddess. The curse of the Bloodfang King was returning, and tonight, she would face it. Somewhere deep within the throne hall, a roar tore through the silence, low and guttural, enough to shake the floor beneath her feet. The castle itself seemed to shudder in response. She ran, heart pounding, hair flying behind her, through corridors lit by flickering torches and scarlet light. The scent of rain and smoke filled the air. When she reached the grand chamber, she froze. There he was, King Theron, kneeling beneath the blood-red window, his claws tearing at the stone, his body half-shifted. His breath came in violent gasps. Veins of silver fire crawled beneath his skin. The curse was consuming him. "Stay back," he growled, voice barely human. "The beast doesn't know mercy." She stepped closer, tears brimming in her eyes. "Then let me remind him." The sound of her voice made him tremble. His golden eyes flashed, not with rage but hunger. The scent of her, soft, clean, human, filled the chamber like a drug. But beneath it, something new stirred, something ancient, the scent of an omega. Isabella didn't understand what was happening. Her skin burned, her pulse raced, the air itself seemed to bend around her. When the moonlight touched her, her aura shimmered faintly, silver threads swirling from her hands, winding toward him like a promise. Theron's body stiffened. His beast, the wolf within, recognized it instantly, a scent that spoke of belonging, of home. He staggered backward, clutching at his chest. "No, this cannot be." "What's happening to me?" she whispered, stepping closer. He looked up at her, eyes wild. You're sent. The blood moon has awakened it. You carry the mark of the Omega, the one my kind was never meant to touch." "Then why does it feel like I was meant to find you?" she said softly. He groaned, his claws sinking into the stone wall as he fought the urge to shift fully. His body wanted her, not from lust, but from instinct older than his curse. The beast inside him howled for its mate. "You must leave, Isabella," he roared. "Before I—" "No," she shouted back, voice shaking but fierce. "I won't run from you." He turned sharply, the veins of light now crawling up his throat, his fangs bared, his control slipping. The temperature dropped, frost creeping over the stones. The moonlight bathed him in crimson, a god and a monster caught between worlds. She stepped closer still. "You're not a monster, my king. You're lonely." Her words cut through the storm like a blade of light. For a heartbeat he froze, panting, trembling, the beast faltering under her gaze. Something inside him cracked. The fury faded, replaced by an emotion more terrifying than rage: vulnerability. Isabella, he whispered, voice breaking. If I hurt you. She reached up, her palm resting against his cheek. Then I'll forgive you, because I know you'd never mean to. A shudder ran through him, not of pain, but surrender. He caught her wrist, his hand shaking violently, claws retracting as he fought to keep control. His voice dropped to a whisper that trembled with emotion. The beast wants to claim you, but the man only wants to protect you. He lifted her hand to his lips, not in lust, but reverence. Then, with a growl that sounded like a prayer, his fangs grazed her skin. A small mark bloomed, glowing silver, shaped like a crescent moon. Isabella gasped, but there was no pain, only warmth. Light pulsed from the wound, rippling through the air, binding them in threads of white fire. The curse screamed, and then, for the first time in centuries, it began to quiet. Theron fell to his knees, eyes blazing gold and silver at once. The mark on her hand flared brighter, echoing the glow on his scar. The bond had formed, not of desire, but destiny. What have you done? He rasped. You've tied your soul to mine. Then maybe your soul won't be alone anymore, she whispered. A wind swept through the chamber, ancient and divine. The torches flared, the ground hummed, and from the window, the moon goddess Selene appeared in spectral light. Her voice echoed like music and thunder. So the beast chooses love once more. Theron bowed his head, trembling. I did not seek it. It found me. The goddess's gaze turned to Isabella, gentle, sorrowful. And you, mortal child, do you understand what you've done? His bond will curse you too. His pain will be yours. Isabella met her gaze without fear. Then let it be mine. I'd rather suffer beside him than live untouched by his heart. The goddess smiled faintly, a rare, fleeting thing. So be it. With a wave of her hand, moonlight poured over them both. The mark on Isabella's hand shimmered like liquid silver. The scar on Theron's chest faded to a pale white line. The chains of the curse loosened, though not broken. Not yet. The bond is true, the goddess said. But beware. The light that heals can also burn. Guard each other, or lose everything. And then she was gone. Silence. Only the crackle of dying torches and the sound of their breathing filled the room. Theron still knelt before her, his hands trembling. You should hate me, he said softly. I marked you. I've bound you to my curse. She smiled through tears, lifting his chin so their eyes met. Maybe it's not a curse anymore. His throat tightened. You don't understand what this means, Isabella. You are now bound to me. Through the moon, through blood, through every lifetime that follows. Then I'll walk through them all, she whispered, until you finally believe you're worth being loved. He closed his eyes, pulling her into his arms. For the first time, the warmth of another soul reached the place where his humanity still lingered. Outside, the blood moon began to fade, and within its dying light, the beast slept, while the man, at last, began to dream. The castle that had once stood as a monument of dread now trembled beneath the weight of destiny. The blood moon's light bled through the high windows, casting crimson ripples across the marble floors where shadows of wolves danced, spirits of kings long dead, whispering their judgment in the wind. For nights Isabella had heard the murmurs echo through the halls. The council was coming. The Lycan elders, rulers older than any mortal kingdom, had decreed that no human could ever be bound to a Lycan King. To them, her presence was not love, but blasphemy, a violation of sacred law, a spark that could doom their kind. And yet, she stayed. Every morning, she brought water to the wounded and helped feed the young Omegas in the servant quarters. The pack had grown to adore her gentle touch, her defiance of fear. They whispered that perhaps she was the one the moon goddess had spoken of, the helpless heart destined to calm the beast. But to the elders, she was a curse wearing human skin. The thunder that rolled across the valley that night wasn't weather. It was power. The air shimmered as ancient Lycans approached, their cloaks woven from the furs of conquered beasts. When they entered the throne hall, Isabella felt her knees weaken. There were 6 of them, eyes glowing gold, voices layered with centuries. The oldest, Elder Kyle, bore a staff carved with moonstone, its surface pulsing faintly with celestial energy. King Theron of the Silverfang bloodline, Kale's voice resonated like a drumbeat. You have broken the covenant of the blood moon. You have taken a mortal as mate, an act punishable by death. Isabella stepped forward before Theron could speak. He didn't take me, she said, her voice trembling but steady. I came to him by choice. If punishment must be given, give it to me. The elder's laughter was cold and ancient. Theron rose from his throne, every inch the king he had been born to be. His eyes glowed a molten amber, the beast barely restrained beneath his skin. You will not touch her, he said, his voice low but shaking the air. The curse you gave me ends tonight. Elder Kale sneered. You defy the goddess herself. I defy your interpretation of her will. Theron growled. The moon's light suddenly intensified. The castle quaked. Every Lycan fell to their knees as the air turned to silver mist. And then she appeared. The moon goddess. Her form shimmered, half woman, half moonlight, her eyes filled with both sorrow and fury. Her voice was like 1,000 whispers echoing at once. Theron of Silverfang, she spoke, you were chosen to bear the curse of betrayal, to learn humility through solitude, and yet you let your heart wander where it does not belong. Theron bowed his head, but did not submit. If love is rebellion, then I will rebel until my dying breath. The goddess turned to Isabella, her expression softening. You would die for him, human child? Isabella met her gaze. Yes, because he has already died 1,000 times for me. The goddess closed her eyes. For a moment, the entire realm seemed to hold its breath. Then, the decision came. Not through words, but through battle. The council demanded the king's surrender. The goddess vanished, leaving only silence and moonlight. Elder Kyle raised his staff, summoning spectral wolves to tear Isabella apart. Theron roared, a sound that split mountains. His armor shattered, revealing his true form, the massive silver Lycan, fur streaked with black, eyes burning with desperate love. He fought like a storm unleashed. Every claw, every howl was for her. Isabella, trembling, ran into the chaos. She found the moonstone staff that Kale had dropped, and with both hands drove it into the ground. The moonlight surged, divine and wild. The spirits howled and vanished. Theron collapsed, blood dripping onto the cold floor. The elders retreated, their power broken but their warning clear. This love will destroy you both, Kyle hissed before fading into mist. When dawn came, the blood moon was gone. The castle was quiet, too quiet. Isabella knelt beside Theron, pressing her forehead to his. His breathing was shallow, his beast form fading, returning to the scarred man she loved. You should have let me go, she whispered, and live in a world without you. He smiled weakly. I would rather be cursed again. She sobbed, her tears falling onto his chest. The mark on her hand, his mark, began to glow. The moon goddess's voice whispered through the wind. Love defied me, yet it has awakened something even I could not destroy. Theron's body shimmered with light as the curse began to break. His wounds closed. The chains of his bloodline dissolved into dust. But the cost was heavy. His power, his immortality, faded. He would live as a mortal, bound to the woman who had taught him mercy. The castle was no longer haunted. The servants began to rebuild. The pack bowed to their new alpha queen, Isabella of Silverfang, the human who saved their king. Theron, once feared as a monster, now walked among his people as a man, flawed, scarred, but finally free. And on nights when the moon rose red again, they said you could still hear the goddess whisper, "Love was never the curse. Pride was." The air was thick with the scent of rain and blood. Outside the castle, the night sky burned crimson. The blood moon had returned, larger than ever before, hanging like a wound in the heavens. The wind howled through the towers, echoing with the cries of the approaching horde. The rebellion had begun. Lucian, the once loyal Beta, now stood at the head of an army of Lycans and rogues, those who still feared the prophecy, who believed the union between their king and a human had doomed them all. His eyes gleamed a deep gold, half-mad with envy and vengeance. "Tonight," Lucian roared, his voice carrying across the dark valley, "the false king dies, and the Silver-Fang throne returns to its rightful blood." The army answered with howls that shook the earth. From the castle walls, Isabella watched the fires spread through the trees below. Her heart pounded, her hand glowing faintly where Theron's mark still pulsed. Warm, alive, defiant. She turned to him, standing at the battlements. His eyes were already shifting, the beast beneath his skin pushing forward in response to the threat. His muscles rippled, his claws began to form, and his breathing grew ragged. "Theron," she whispered, grabbing his arm. "Don't let it consume you again." He looked down at her, his eyes flickering between amber and red. "If I lose control, run. Promise me that." She shook her head. "I've run enough in my life. This time I stay." Before he could reply, the first explosion hit. The gate shattered in a burst of flame and silver. Rogues poured into the courtyard, their fangs glinting under the bloodlight. Theron's roar split the air. He leapt from the wall, his transformation complete, towering, silver-furred, his eyes blazing like twin suns. He crashed into the enemy line, tearing through them with unrelenting fury. Inside the castle, chaos reigned. Servants screamed as they hid behind stone pillars. The Omega Guards, loyal to the king, fought desperately to defend their home. Lucian moved like a shadow through the chaos, his silver sword shimmering with moonlight. He was faster, colder, fueled by years of suppressed rage. "You could have ruled beside me," he hissed as he struck down one of the guards, "but you chose her, a fragile mortal." Theron's roar answered him, shaking the walls. The two Lycans met in the grand hall, their claws clashing, teeth bared. Sparks flew from the marble as they collided again and again, each blow echoing like thunder. Lucien's blade cut across Theron's chest, and black blood spilled. The king staggered but did not fall. He struck back with a savage fury that sent Lucian crashing into a pillar, shattering it into dust. But even as Lucian fell, his laughter filled the room. "You think love will save you, brother? It's your weakness, and I'll prove it." His gaze darted to Isabella. Lucian lunged toward her. Everything slowed. The sound of battle faded, replaced by the pounding of Isabella's heartbeat. She saw the glint of silver, the cruel smirk on his lips, the blade aimed for her heart. Theron moved faster than thought. He threw himself between them, the blade sinking deep into his chest. Time stopped. Isabella screamed, catching him as he fell. Blood ran warm over her hands. His eyes, once fierce and wild, softened as they met hers. "Isabella," he breathed, voice faint. "Don't cry. You've already given me everything." Lucian sneered. "Then die together." He raised his sword for the final strike, but before he could bring it down, the air itself ignited. The mark on Isabella's hand flared like a star. The ground trembled, the moonlight thickened, and her voice echoed with a divine resonance that wasn't her own. "Enough," she said, though her voice was layered with another's, the moon goddess speaking through her. Lucian's sword melted to ash in his grip. His eyes widened in terror as invisible chains bound him to the ground. "Your ambition has poisoned what was meant to be pure," the goddess's voice boomed. "You have forgotten loyalty and love." Lucian screamed as the moonlight engulfed him, turning his body to dust. Isabella fell to her knees beside Theron, who was barely breathing. The light surrounded them both now, soft and blinding. "Please," she whispered to the heavens, tears streaming down her face. "Don't take him. Take me instead." The goddess's voice softened. "Would you give your mortal life for his cursed soul?" "Yes," Isabella said without hesitation. The moonlight poured into Theron's wound. His body arched as the light consumed him, and the beast within began to dissolve, the curse unraveling strand by strand. His claws melted away, his eyes faded from amber to soft gray. The silver fur turned to skin, the fangs disappeared. When the light dimmed, he lay there, fully human. His hand reached up weakly, touching her face. "You saved me." Isabella smiled through her tears. "We saved each other." The goddess's voice whispered one last time before fading into the wind. "Love has conquered what blood and curse could not. The beast is gone. The king remains." When the morning came, the battlefield was silent. The rogues had fled. The air smelled of rain and rebirth. Theron stood at the gates, now dressed in simple robes, no longer a creature of myth, just a man with a scarred past and a woman who had loved him enough to heal it. Lucian's rebellion was over. The pack swore loyalty once more, this time not out of fear but devotion. Isabella became his queen, and the once cursed castle became a sanctuary, a place where humans and Lycans could live as one. And on the nights when the blood moon rose again, its light was no longer crimson but silver, pure and soft, as if the goddess herself had blessed their love. The castle that had once been shrouded in blood and sorrow now bathed in silver light. The war was over. The Lycan banners, once torn by centuries of rage, now fluttered gently in the wind, symbols of unity, not fear. The fields that surrounded the mountains were alive again. Flowers bloomed where blood had been spilled. The wolves that once prowled with vengeance now lay peacefully beneath the moonlight. And upon the highest terrace of the castle, beneath the quiet glow of the full moon, the Lycan King knelt before his queen. Theron, once the monster of every legend, lowered his head. The faint scar across his chest shimmered like starlight, a reminder of both his curse and his salvation. His once feral eyes now held only warmth. "You gave me your light," he said softly, his deep voice trembling, "when I only had darkness." Isabella, now radiant in a flowing silver gown that caught the moon's light like water, reached out and touched his face. "And you," she whispered, "gave me a reason to stay, even when the world told me to run." Their eyes met, the air humming with something ancient and eternal. The bond between them, once forbidden, now burned brighter than any star. The moon goddess herself seemed to smile from above. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying a voice only they could hear. "The curse is broken, but love remains. From your union, a new age will rise, where beast and human walk as one." As the words faded, moonlight wrapped around them both, illuminating their joined hands. The mark that once bound them in pain now shimmered as a sign of divine blessing. From the mountains below, the pack began to howl, not in mourning, but in celebration. The night sky echoed with joy. Days later, the grand hall filled with light and laughter. The great throne of stone had been replaced with one of white wood, carved with symbols of moon and vine. Theron stood at Isabella's side, not as ruler over her, but beside her, equal in power and heart. When he placed the silver crown upon her head, the hall erupted in cheers. Wolves bowed, humans knelt. The kingdom, once divided, now stood together. "Rise," Isabella said gently to the crowd. "There are no slaves in this kingdom, no only beasts. Hearts that beat the same." And for the first time in history, the Lycans and humans applauded together. That night, when the castle had quieted, Theron and Isabella walked the gardens under the moon. He stopped, turning toward her with a soft, rare smile. "Do you ever wonder," he murmured, "if the moon goddess still watches us?" Isabella's eyes lifted toward the heavens. "She doesn't need to," she said. "She's watching through us now." As they stood beneath the silver glow, a single streak of light crossed the sky, a falling star, shimmering with lunar brilliance. The mark on their hands pulsed once, gently, like a heartbeat. And when they kissed, the entire forest seemed to breathe again. The trees swayed, the rivers glimmered, the moon itself brightened as though the heavens rejoiced in what had finally been restored. Love, peace, and the promise of forever. Once, the blood moon brought only sorrow, but now, it rises each year as a symbol of love reborn, a reminder that even in the darkest of souls, light can find its way home.